Hey, everybody. Thank you so much for joining us for this week's episode of Tarot Solution Shy Podcast. I am so happy to have back with us this week Tina Phillips, owner of No Shame Counseling and Reiki. So she was with us before. She joined us before, and we had a wonderful time. And Tina, how are you feeling tonight?
I'm feeling wonderful. How are you?
I'm doing excellent. Thank you so much. So thank you again so much for joining me tonight. And I know we have an amazing topic, so I will let you just get right into it because I myself too am really interested to hear.
Awesome. Well, first, let me just say this, just as a disclaimer. We are going to be talking about sexual assault survivorship tonight. And so I just wanted to put out there, because I am a licensed therapist, that if you feel triggered, and basically a trigger is anything that reminds you of a traumatic experience that you had or that you are aware of. So if you feel triggered at all, if it's something that you can manage, you can always reach out to a local counselor or therapist or even a good friend in your area. If you don't have a counselor or therapist, you can always go to psychologytoday.com and look for a therapist in your area. If not, if you're feeling like it's an emergency, then you want to pick up the phone and dial 911 or go to your nearest emergency room. But do know that there is support out there for you. There's a lot of online groups and a lot of other groups right now who are meeting with other people who have also experienced sexual assault, either as a primary survivor or as a secondary survivor. Right. So just wanted to throw that out there for you.
Yes, thank you.
We'll be framing it, though, really from a space of healing and really from a space of survivorship and not from a space of victimhood.
Okay, excellent. So one thing that I've seen a lot now, there's because of technology and people becoming more aware, do you agree that it's more coming to the forefront, or how have you encountered, people healing through sexual assault through your work?
I definitely am seeing a lot. There's a huge shift. So obviously there were some national movements, right, like the Me Too movement, that definitely brought a lot of things to light. But really, when you think about it, sexual assault for a long time was something that only white women really identified with openly. And so what we have been looking to do in the mental health field and in the sector of sexual assault work in general has been to provide more education to other demographics. So really targeting men, really targeting the LGBTQIA community, as well as targeting communities like minority communities and like the elderly and also children, because a lot of times what's happening is a lot of us really aren't educated. A lot of people think that if you have to be like, dramatically raped, if you will, in order for it to be a sexual assault. And while that is very much a sexual assault, it's also very much a sexual assault to be fondled. It's also very much a sexual assault to be touched when you didn't ask to be touched, to be touched when you're under the influence of alcohol. So there are a lot of things that are sexual assault that people just aren't aware of. So a big part of what we've been doing is trying to change the awareness. And through that, yes, we are seeing a new shift with a lot of people coming in and saying, I want counseling. We're also seeing a huge shift with a lot of people coming to say, I want to volunteer and impart things into this community because I was a part of that community, or I am a part of that community. Because once you're a survivor, you're always a survivor. And I think it should be a badge of courage, not one of shame.
Wow. Yes, definitely. And that's how I like to refer to it, as a survivor. So say that when somebody does make that decision and they realize, that those things, took place, and they take that step and they come into your office or somebody else, or they, whatever, they begin online counseling. What is that process like, for other people who wouldn't know? How can other people be compassionate towards somebody who has been sexually assaulted and now they're in the process of identifying it and starting to, go through that healing?
Yeah, so, it's a very individualized process for everybody. So I think the number one thing I would tell your listeners and tell people in general is if you are seeking counseling, first of all, you want to seek out a therapist who is trauma informed and who is also trauma trained, right? Because this is a big deal, and you don't do therapy in a regular kind of way when you're working with trauma. It's a little bit different. So you definitely want to seek out someone who is trauma-informed and trauma-trained. And when you go in, it's not like your very first appointment, they're going to be like, tell me everything that happened to you. That's not the process at all. In fact, one of the modalities that I utilize is called CPT, or cognitive processing therapy. It's typically, we are usually about 4 or 5 sessions in before we're even starting to scratch the surface, before we start having you do what we call a narrative, where you share your story. And a lot of what we're doing is getting information, but it's also building rapport. So when you have been sexually assaulted, one of the effects the lasting effects that happens, or the long-term impact of that, is having a struggle with connecting with others. So either we hyper-connect, which means we connect with everybody who comes in our life, which we all know isn't healthy because everybody isn't safe. Or what we typically see is a fear to connect. So one of the main things that we do as a therapist is really try to connect with you. So we're going to try to learn more about you. We're going to make sure that you feel comfortable with us. So that's a big part of the process, and you don't walk alone. That's really the whole purpose of therapy, is you're the one walking. We're just walking alongside you. You pick the destination. You choose where we take a pit stop, all those sorts of things. You can even say, I don't want you to walk with me anymore. I want to walk with somebody else. And that's okay, too. And we champion you're making your own decisions, because that's another way that sexual assault impacts us. A lot of times we stop trusting ourselves. And so this is a way that it helps you to be able to trust who you are. So I will always champion my clients making big decisions on their own. For the general public, if you know someone, so we would call you a secondary survivor, which means I didn't experience the sexual assault myself, but someone I know and love did. So you're a secondary survivor. So as a secondary survivor, what your role is to hold space. And when I say hold space, I mean walk non-judgmentally with that person. So we're all walking alongside them. What I usually tell my clients is we are team whoever. So we would be team Stephanie, or you could be team Tina, right? So there's a whole team of people, and you have to get safe people who are willing to walk with you while holding space. It means there's no judgment, and I'm with you in this thing no matter what. So that means if tomorrow you're sad and you're depressed and you don't want to talk to me, that doesn't mean that I fall apart and I'm like, well, you know what, forget it then, we're done, or you're always sulking, you're always sad. Like, that's not how that works.
Right.
It's about really having that non-judgment piece. And a lot of times people are well-meaning.
Yes.
You know, people think that they're doing the right thing in the moment, but sometimes they inflict more pain on an already painful situation, on an already open wound. So that would be what I would say to most people. Just hold space and ask people what they need. Like, so just say, you know, I always tell people when we're getting ready to do the narrative portion of the therapy, where you do tell your story, you do share your story, I say to them, hey, you might want to reach out and let everybody else on the team know that you're getting ready to do this step, so that they can be available to you. And you can let them know, hey, I may need some extra support during this time. So whatever that looks like, it doesn't mean that you go over and you try to be the therapist, or you go over and you try to be the doctor, or anything like that. It may mean I'm going to come over and sit down and we're going to watch TV together. Right. It may mean let's go get an ice cream, or let's go take a walk together. Or it may mean let me go pick up your babies for you from school, so you have 30 minutes to yourself. Right. So support looks very different for different people.
Yes, no, I love it. I love it. Thank you so much. In the last couple minutes that we have here, we have about 6 minutes left. Can you explain? I know that therapy, you know, it's not, I want to think of it as that it's not linear, and the processes, you know, that you're talking about healing. So what are some of the challenges, and what is the goal of therapy when somebody goes to therapy for sexual assault?
Usually I would say, so like I said, you really pick what the goal is for you. My goal always as a therapist is for people to leave me more healed than wounded. So I want you to leave better than when you came to me. And so what happens with so sexual assault is a trauma. It's a major trauma, right? And most people who experience that have PTSD. And so one of the ways that one of the things that happens with PTSD in your brain is that it makes the trauma feel like it's everything. So it becomes the lens through which you see the world, and it also becomes the filter through which you experience the world and that the world experiences you. So everything runs through that filter of trauma. So what my goal usually is with my clients is, instead of it being like 80% of your life or 80% of who you are, let's shrink it. So a lot of people are walking around thinking, I have a type A personality, or I'm this way, or, this is just how I am. I like things a certain way. And a lot of times what I tell people is the hardest part of therapy, in all honesty, and I've gone through therapy too. I'm a secondary sexual assault survivor, but I've gone through therapy for other traumas I've experienced. The hardest part wasn't talking about the trauma for me. The hardest part was identifying my true self. Because so many of us, especially if you dealt with like child molestation, you really don't know who you are. Because the trauma has become the filter, and it has taken up so much of your identity that a lot of times you don't know who you are. And so the scariest and hardest part is shedding the old you and finding the new you, and getting acquainted with her or getting acquainted with him, and then learning to live with the new changes, because then you have to introduce that person to everybody else who only knew the old traumatized you. And so that was, for me, that was the hardest step. So my goal, it's a lot.
That's revelation. Like we used to say in the church, that's revelation.
Yeah, that's what it is. I'm telling you, so many people think that they're a certain way, and I'm like, that's not you, baby. That's trauma. Yes. That's just trauma. That's all that is. So it's really about shrinking it. So usually I tell people, if you're living right now where that sexual assault is 80% of your life, or 80% of who you are, impacting 80% of who you are, I don't trust people. I don't deal with women because they're this way. I don't deal with men because they're this way. We can't. And there it happened. We can't. That's my goal for therapy usually.
Okay, no. Well, thank you again so much, Tina, for joining us today. I love everything that you said. I think it's such a powerful message. Like you said, everything, the shift that's happening, and people becoming conscious about how, touch without consent, or, etc., about how that is sexual assault and everything. I loved it. So thank you so much for all the work that you do in the community. Did you want to leave anybody with the links? I know you talked about psychologytoday.com, but anything else, and also with your links too?
Yeah, you can, psychologytoday.com is a wonderful place. I know I also am on therapy for Black girls and also therapy for Black men. So there's a lot of different spaces that you can find a therapist in your area that's free to you to be able to go in and look at different therapist profiles. You can find me at noshamecounseling.com. On Instagram, I am noshamecounseling_Reiki. On Facebook, I am noshamecrc. So C, counseling, Reiki, and consultation. No shame. So please follow me. Say hey. Say what's up. Be sure to tell me that you heard me on Stephanie's podcast.
Yes. Definitely. No, thank you guys. Like, follow, share, everything. Subscribe. You still there? I'm having a little trouble hearing you. You still there? It's kind of cutting out a little bit. Can you hear me?
You can't hear me?
Oh, yeah, it was cut out a little bit. You there? You good, though?
Okay, can you hear me?
Yes,
yeah,
no, perfect.
Can you hear me now?
Yeah, no, it's perfect. Well, no, I just want to say again, thank you so much for joining us, and I really appreciate it. Hope to have you on soon in the future, and God bless.
Thank you so much. You have a good night. I appreciate you.
All right. No, thank you. God bless you guys, and tune in for the next episode, and you guys be blessed and be a blessing. Okay. Thank you, and have a wonderful night.